Thanks again once again for joining us on this lovely summer's day. So we're going to start off first of all with the new build. So we're going to be representing a new build and a previously painted surface. Zach will be doing the previously painted surfaces this after me. So inside your bucket you'll have a booklet where it's exactly what you see on the slideshow. You will have it there. So if you need to make any notes for yourself, that's where I think it's going to be a working tool for you guys going forward in. Obviously there's a lot of guys that just specialize in repaints, a lot of guys that do new developments. We are here to just give you a guideline. You guys know how to work. We just want to work together to try and make sure that we can have a better paint core system going on to a house that's going to make it last so much longer. Okay, so we're going to start at the new build at the foundation stage. And as you can see in the top right hand corner there, the picture with the foundation that's been put in. So at this stage, a lot of times the guys are not really going as far as doing proper damp proofing as what we'd like them to do. So at this stage with the pic there, it shows you the foundation gone in and you're going up to your DPC level, your plinth level. But before the guys backfill in the soil and where they're busy putting those areas, it's ideally a recommendation to put on paint cores acrylatex mixed with cement, our 2K system, which is where you'll take 1 part acrylatex with 2 parts of cement, and you mix it into a slurry. So sorry, also guys, you're going to get a lot of repeats, but it's just the way to explain it, unfortunately. So before you backfill in your soil, it's ideal to go and put tanking solution on your foundation wall on the inside. A lot of people always forget about the inside, but if you've got steps inside your house where it's going to be a backfilled retaining wall, please ensure that you guys waterproof it using the latex system. You take the 2 parts cement with 1 part latex, mix it into a slurry, and you'd obviously apply it onto the brick wall. Obviously 2 coats, putting on 1 coat in a vertical direction and the second coat in the vertical direction, creating that crisscross. Once that's done, you can backfill with your soil. Then obviously at the same time you'd want to do the outside as well. Obviously on the brick prior to doing any other kind of paint work or plastering thereof. The same principle happens where you take your slurry and put it onto the surface. Then we're moving over to the boundary wall over here, the boundary wall in the middle. A lot of the times guys don't put DPC into a boundary wall, but obviously there's always a problem with rising damp, and our system that we've got using paint cores acrylatex again, in conjunction with the alkali resistant membrane, the grey one, we would recommend that you put it at the bottom, maybe a couple of bricks out of the foundation, where you would actually put the alkali resistant membrane, saturated obviously with a slurry. You do it on the first step of the first brick and then on the second step of the double brick wall, if that makes sense. So you're working in a jagged, not on a flat. And the ideal thing to do is to actually let the product still be wet so that when you're busy building on top of it, that the two systems really marry into each other, creating a good waterproofing barrier so that you don't get rising damp in a boundary wall where people can eventually end up having a better result going down. The third picture over here, this is where we are talking about the normal DPC system. Is where a lot of the time the guys have got plastic. In some instances the guys don't have it. That's obviously where you can once again be doing the acrylatic system on the outside. So prior to your plaster work, that's going to be happening. You put in your latex slurry on, 2 coats, sorry about that. Put in on your 2 coats again as explained previously. Okay, moving on to the slide B now, which is the new build wet works. And this is where it starts getting a little bit better. So we're going to start off with the first picture over there with the face brick house. Now you've got your foundation and you're building a face brick house. A lot of the times the people don't think of putting any kind of system onto the house to protect it whatsoever. Obviously a lot of you guys are aware of our product called Clinker Seal. Clinker Seal is a liquid silicone. It's a siloxane based product. What it does is onto the face brick it seals the capillaries. So it prevents the surface from absorbing water. You must understand that it's very imperative to do that in our conditions because we're getting so much humidity around in Johannesburg where we never used to have it in the past. Remember, you must obviously put on 2 to 3 coats onto your face brick. You mustn't allow it to dry between coats. You must put it on wet on wet. So what we mean by wet on wet, you take the front facade, starting from left to right, and when you get to the end of it, you come back to the end, to the beginning again, and you put on another coat. So you obviously want to completely saturate the substrate simultaneously within a period of an hour or so. Okie dokie. The other alternative which we have is a product called Stone Seal. Stone Seal is a UV brick and stone sealer. It is an incredible product. Obviously it enhances your brick. So the one thing I didn't mention with the Clinker Seal, it doesn't change the appearance of the brick whatsoever. Where you get Stone Seal now, that does change the appearance. It enhances it. Obviously it's nice because now people feel like it's been more protected. You obviously got to make sure you also saturate it, but you want to make sure that you would actually let the surface dry properly before you put subsequent coats on top of each other. You know, a lot of the time also when we're busy doing applications of products, you've got to make sure that you allow for the correct drying times when it's needed. And if need be, you guys can refer to the data sheets or contact us, please, because we're there to help you to get the best results possible. We're going to move to the middle slide now, where we are talking about, actual fact, I'm going to jump to the left, sorry, to go to the damp proofing slide and the plastering before we go to the internal rendering. So the damp proofing side there, now where you've got the clinker seal and the acrylatex, this is where you've got your damp proof around the bottom. As we mentioned, that you've now got your brick around the bottom of your DPC level, and now you've done the rendering of the acrylatex, now you've plastered it. Obviously, it's imperative also, guys, when you are mixing your plaster ratios, there's plaster ratios and there's plaster ratios. People have got to understand with the right ratios, you obviously want to stick to it as per the Concrete and Cement Institute, just to make sure that it's done correctly. The system then, what you can use is Paintcore's acrylatex to also mix into the plaster to make it more waterproof if you want to. At a stage where some guys don't use that, then they will just use a decent plaster mix. When you've got your raw plaster on the house at the bottom, you can use clinker seal. Also, once again, onto the raw plaster, that seals the capillaries again to prevent any water from ingressing into the substrate. For the plastering, on the slide at the bottom over there, plastering, obviously, we've got a product of Paintcore's called Plaster Bond, which is the plaster key additive, which will give you increased adhesion onto the surface to which you're busy plastering. The acrylatex is, again, it can be utilized as a damp proofing solution. So sometimes it's added to the plaster, and then some other options it's also done as a damp proofing onto the brick. Once you have plastered the surface and you feel the need to speed up the process, if I can call it that, we have a product called Cementec, which is a curing agent. So Cementec, it is a solvent-based pure acrylic, and what happens is that it can actually be applied onto damp but not green plaster. So if it's very wet, you want to just give it a day, and then you can actually put on the Cementec already. A lot of the time, the guys tend to try and push the project a bit too quickly. Cementec is a product that can actually handle the moisture within the substrate of the plaster before applying subsequent plaster primers. So a lot of times, you know, these are the kind of conditions that you guys are working in. You've got tight frames where you've got to push. So Cementec is a kind of product that will help you guys out in that aspect of it. Moving to the inside of the new house now, of the wet works, where you also once again have got the option of plastering, or in some instances skimming the product using our flash skim. So the product of Plaster Bond is obviously utilized if you are going to be brush plastering, steel float, wood floated finishes, whatever the case may be. On the alternative where you're wanting to have an ultra smooth finish, where you want to use a product of ours called flash skim, which is very, very popular with a lot of people out there, we would recommend that before you put the flash skim on, that you use Paintcore's AcrySeal. A lot of the times you'll know that when you're busy wood floating the surface, you get the little sand fines that come to the surface. And when you're busy skimming, it ends up being a bit of a problem because obviously those little stones pick up into the flash skim. So sometimes you tell the guys, make sure that you sweep off the excess, seal it with a coat of AcrySeal. AcrySeal is like a surface stabilizer. For those who don't know, you can obviously mix it 1-to-1 with water. It is alkali resistant, it's got good binding properties, it spreads very, very far, and then it'll seal up the surface well before you'd go and plow on Paintcore's flash skim. Now, flash skim is a skimming compound, it's already mixed. It comes out of the bucket, it's a lovely product, goes on smooth at about 1 mil thick. It's a product that can be utilized instead of the Rhinolite. The nice thing about it is that it doesn't have to be primed or anything before you want to apply your top coats. So you can just make sure the surface is clean, give it a light sanding. If need be, take off the sanding dust and you can apply your final coats. So it's a great product. It doesn't have to be primed. As I say, you can apply your top coats straight onto it. Okay, that is slide B. Are there any questions at this stage that anybody would like to ask? Okay, now we're moving on to the slide C. That's the new build waterproofing, and I suppose this is where it gets a little bit more tricky. So everybody's got their own methodology of how to do their projects. We're just trying to, once again, show you the guideline. Some guys have got their own little ways and means, but this is how we recommend it being done. If you've got any questions, as I say, after the show, you can give us a shout. Okay, we're going to start off, unfortunately, we're going to start off on the right-hand side again. Talking about a waterproofing system. So Paintcore manufactures a variety of waterproofing systems. The first one is the cementitious-based waterproofing system. That's our acrylatex with the cement. The second option we have is the Aquamat, which is the fiber reinforced product. It is a modified acrylic, so it's actually a very, very specialized waterproofing system. There's a lot of other guys out there that have got a fiber reinforced waterproofing system. but there's a big difference between the two, and we can discuss that with you guys after the show, that you can really see the strength of it. And then the third option, we have the AquaSeal system, which is used in conjunction with the membrane. So we'll start off with the acrylatex system. That's the 2K waterproofing system. That's the latex mixed with cement. So when you waterproof in a flat deck roof with a parapet, as shows in the picture over here, when you're busy priming the surface, you would first want to use the AquaSeal. AquaSeal is being utilized over various uses. And I always believe that a contractor should always have a drum of AquaSeal with them, because it's always going to cover a multitude of sins, and it's always something that you can start. Because remember, painting and waterproofing is all about adhesion, adhesion, adhesion. And that's the most important thing. If something's going to stick, then it's going to last. So you got the alkali resistant membrane that you're going to be using with the slurry. So you've now put on the AquaSeal onto the screed, and it's now firmly bound up, and now it's going to be ready for waterproofing. So you're going to be applying it. So you're going to put your slurry down onto the surface, and you're going to make sure that you correctly embed the membrane into that substrate. Because what happens is you want to make sure that there's no air pockets and that the membrane is completely saturated. Otherwise, it's not going to be doing its waterproofing that it's intended to do. Obviously, it's imperative that you make sure that the corners are done. A lot of guys do it differently. If they've got a parapet, they first go from the parapet with the overlap coming down, and then some guys take it from the vertical down again. So however you find it best for you. Obviously, the membrane has got to be completely saturated, adhering to the substrate, and no air pockets at all. And once it's cured, then you want to apply your subsequent top coats on top of it. The nice thing about it is when it's done, it's obviously sticking to the surface, that you can apply any of our top coats like Elegance or Ruvacryl as a maintenance coat, and you can also tint it to the color of your choice. You must also make sure, when you're busy doing your waterproofing, that you also always got overlaps. A lot of times we tend to do waterproofing way too quickly, and what happens then is you get solvent entrapment. So please ensure that your drying times between the coats of waterproofing are done, and let it work properly, because then otherwise it's not going to be effective as what you'd like. The same happens with the Aquamat. It works with the same. The Aquamat obviously works in conjunction with the white membrane. Same theory, where you're going to put on the AquaSeal first. It's going to bind up the screed. It's going to be a nice sound surface before you put on the Aquamat and embed the white membrane. And once it's dry, you put on your subsequent top coats. Working those corners, making sure there's no any holes and cavities, coming up the vertical with your overlap. Okay. And then the last system that most of you guys would also know is the AquaSeal, which is available in a variety of colors, and you can do it with the same process. Sealer, AquaSeal, and away you go. What we recommend is, as you see the picture now of the tile, before I come to the window frame, with your shower and areas like that, we always recommend that the cementitious-based waterproofing system is more popular where you're going to be tiling over it, because it's obviously got a nice coarseness to it. So your tiles being taken over on top of that are going to be much more effective. So that's something that we've seen is a whole lot better. So we definitely advise guys to do that. When you've got a double-story house, or even for that matter, a single-story house, and you've got a shower, your shower backs onto a passage or something, a lot of guys think, no, we can just tile it. It'll be fine. Water won't get through it. Gents, wherever there's water, ladies, wherever there's water, waterproof it. Make sure the wall, the vertical, the corner, the horizontal, prior to your tiling, please. So that's ensure that all the corners are done with the membrane. Use it with the alkali resistant membrane before you're going to put your tiles on top of it. Okay, now moving on to the windowsill or the window frame in the middle. Now I've been taught this recently by a colleague of mine who's been very, very particular about it, and it does make a lot of sense, and I think you might have learned from the Baldwin guys, that when the guys are coming and they're busy building and they're busy plastering, you're using a corner tool, and the corner tool, obviously you're applying it with a bit of pressure, and when you're applying it with a bit of pressure, you're squeezing that water out of the plaster because you're trying to get a nice smooth edge. So what happens is you're pushing the water out, which is actually making the plaster not stay hydrated for longer because the water is busy escaping the surface. In that, you actually end up having a couple of stress cracks. With the stress cracks happening, obviously then you get those little cracks all over the show. It's a very good idea to use our waterproofing system inside the reveals as well as the parapet or the windowsill. Obviously, referring to the waterproofing, we're always talking about the horizontal surface. So your windowsill, but now on the reveal, you're going to go up so that you can see those stress fractures that have got those hairline cracks. And I'm sure you've all seen it, even when it runs along a lintel as well. So the more that you can give it film build around then of a waterproofing substance like Aquamat, which is reinforced and strong, it's going to give you a lot more lastability. Everybody okay with that? Cool. So the question has been asked that Aquamat obviously is the kind of product that's got a lot of texture to it once it's been applied, and obviously it shows out. So it's all about film build. And I suppose the film board is going to give you the protection. Obviously, the nice thing about Aquamat is that when you're applying it at a certain thickness very quickly. So the only thing it's going to mean it's going to take a couple of coats of the AquaSeal to get to that, because the product itself is thinner compared to, or the viscosity of it compared to the Aquamat. So it'll just take a couple more coats. Also remember, when you got the reveal, guys, as you saw there, even that little lip, which is about 10 millimeters, can you believe it, going around the window frame. Guys, if it's as small as 10 mils, it's classified as a parapet. It's a top surface, it's horizontal. Make sure it is waterproofed. Any area that can take a little bit of ponding, water is going to migrate into it. So make sure that you really seal it up, please. Okay, folks, moving on to the next slide. That'll be slide D now, where we are going to be talking about the new build external. So we've basically plastered the house now, and now it comes the part where you can start spending money with Paintcore, buying your primers and undercoats. So once again, we've spoken about Cementec, but I'm going to mention it again, is that with a lot of the conditions that the guys are working in, we know that according to the certain bylaws, it says, or not bylaws, to the rules, they say that plaster should dry for 28 days. I know that there's variances and those kind of things, but to make sure that the plaster is cured properly, and you want to try, or not properly, that you want to speed up the process, we do have the product called Cementec. So you've got two options when you're busy painting a house. That if you've got a lot of moisture stuck within the substrate and you need to paint quicker and you're using the Cementec, then you can go onto your plaster primers. A lot of time the guys wanted to go a little bit more water-based, but at this stage I want to tell you that using a water-based product, when your plaster is not properly cured, it's going to be a problem, because you're going to have a problem with alkali burn. Alkali burn is when your plaster is not properly cured, and then it's still busy drying out. As you've put on your primer coats and you've put on your top coats, it's going to actually attack the pigment in the top coat, and then you're going to get those patches in it. So please make sure, if you're working within the confines of making sure that the plaster is dry, then you can go with the water-based. If you're going a little bit quicker, then you've got to start utilizing the plaster primer trade, or the plaster primer premium, or something like the Cementec to actually give you the barrier coat. Okay, dokes. So we'll start off with the Cementec. As mentioned before, it is a curing agent. It can go into your damp plaster, that is actually going to give you a barrier off before you're going to put on top coats. It's also going to give you more strength onto the plaster. Your MPA strength, if it's just going to stay so much better, because we've also used it on floors where that moisture is not drying out too quickly. And as you know, if plaster stays damp for a little bit longer and it stays hydrated, it's going to just get tougher and tougher. Then obviously, going after the Cementec, we have the product called Plaster Primer Trade. Plaster Primer Trade, that's obviously very common. It's our solvent-based plaster primer, great for water resistance, it's alkali resistance. It's obviously a great product overall that you can utilize on basically any surface. In the case where sometimes you may be working within a concealed area, if you're working inside and it's not very well ventilated, and sometimes you might feel a little bit lightheaded from the fumes of the damp of the trade, we do have the option of using Paintcore's Plaster Primer Premium. Plaster Primer Premium is a waterborne, it's new technology. The nice thing about it is that it's very low odor. It can also be utilized on basically a multitude of areas. It can go onto rhinolite, it can go onto powdery surfaces, it does bind up with those kind of things. But the nice thing is it's low odor. It is like it's a little bit off-whitish in color, but the nice thing is that it gives you a good base where you can apply your final top coats on top of it. So you must just bear that in mind. If you ever need to worry about the odor or things like that for your painters, that's an option for you to utilize. So now we're going on to a normal water-based system onto your plastered house. The systems that you see there, number one is the AquaSeal. The AquaSeal is once again the surface stabilizer. That is the one that you dilute with water, as I'm sure you guys all know. It can go onto your plaster, it can go onto previously painted surfaces. So that will bind up a surface, that is very good. Sealer-Mix. Sealer-Mix is a pigmented acrylic sealer. So Sealer-Mix it's a water-based plaster primer per se. It's a very good product to go on like brush plaster or scratch plaster, a surface that's very, very rough or porous, or it's got a lot of fines on it, where it's actually made for penetrating and binding it up. So it doesn't have a lot of hiding power, but in these instances, when you've got a lot of friable particles on the surface, it's going to penetrate and bind it up. It is also alkali resistant to a degree, as long as you don't have very, very wet surfaces. Sometimes guys tend to use it because they feel like it's also going to allow the moisture to breathe out before they go back and paint it a couple of weeks later. Then we'll move on to our Acrylanda. Acrylanda is a great filler coat for a system. It's got good hiding properties. That's the kind of product, if you put it on good wooden floated surfaces where you're going to be applying and you want to get obliteration very, very quickly. It covers up very, very well. And in some instances, if you've got some dark colors on a house and want to go light inside or outside, you can use a product like acrylane because it's got really good obliteration rather quickly. But once again, you want to make sure that you work within the parameters of drying times and overcoating periods. Okay, now moving on to the top coats. Obviously, that's the big boys. That's all about the protection factor, and I think we might have a little bit of words about this now. So we're going to start off with our texture coatings, which Paintcore manufactures. There's obviously a variety of texture coatings that we've realized that we've had to start developing for a while now. Lots of imperfections, lots of plasterwork out there. It's becoming harder and harder to patch. So a lot of guys are starting to turn to texture coatings to try and hide and cover imperfections to give you a better result at the end of the day to make your homeowner a happier person. The one product we got is Grantex, which is a granulated rough texture. It's a really, really amazing product. It covers up a real multitude of sins. It's a very, very rough texture. At this stage also, once again, speaking about Hamilton's over here, using texture coats, it's very, very important that using the right roller or the wrong roller to get the right finish that you want, it's going to give you the desired texture on the house. So whether you're using a sheepskin roller, it's a bit rougher or smoother. If you're using the yellow one, which is the sponge roller, it'll be a lot rougher. There's also a couple of ways to do it though. You must understand when you are utilizing a texture, there's a couple of practices that need to be carried out when you're using a texture. It's always advisable to work in a shaded area at a time, especially in a day like today. You can imagine painting out in the sun. It tends to dry very, very quickly on the surface, and you get inconsistent textures, and you don't have a window period with it long enough because it's drying too quickly, and then you over-roll it, and you get different textures. So if you need any advice with that, we can talk about it to try and give you guidance. Obviously, there's a couple of guys out there that specialize in doing textures. If they're doing a double-story house, they're going to have to put up scaffolding because it's really quite intricate. But you guys can do it. Everybody can do anything if we just train you in the right manner. So that's our Grantex, a great product for covering, and it's also a great product because it can, the sheen that it's got at the moment, and they're busy reformulating it. That's the nice thing. You always know that our bosses out there are in the lab always trying to find newer resins or newer products. So they're busy working on some at the moment to make the product even a little bit more flexible, just knowing for the kind of sins that a house has. So that's what we're working with at the moment as well. The next product we got is Satin Tex, which is a finer texture. It doesn't have a particle in it. It's actually more made up of a coating system. So that's also a great product that goes on depending on the texture roller that you're using. It'll go into a nice fine finish. It's becoming very popular because it's also got a bit of a matte finish and it's got good flexibility in it. So where the guys have got serious plaster repairs that have been carried out, because you're going back to open up cracks and fix up where you need to be, and this is mainly on new buildings as well, that it actually is a matte product so you don't see all the imperfections on the surface as such. The last texture coating which we have is Rippletex. Rippletex is also, it's a coating system. It's actually got a film build of notes, and once again that's been applied with two different rollers. It's very popular with the sheepskin roller because the guys that used to use it with the ripple roller back in the day, they would put it on and they would have problems with the drying times of it. So that's where I spoke about the drying times earlier, making sure that if you don't know how to really work with the texture, let us really guide you and show you. It's a great product to be overcoated as well. It doesn't have to be, but when you want to get a product that's going to cover your imperfection, then before you put your final coats on to give you the washability on the product, you can do that, no problem at all. Okay, now on to our normal finish paints other than the textured. We all know the Elegance, we know the Pristine, and we know the Essence. So Elegance is obviously available in two finishes. It's available in the matte and in the silk. The Elegance matte, it's a great product. Elegance silk, it's just the two different, as you can see, although the matte says matte, it has still got a slight sheen to it because obviously it's got certain waterproofing properties in it that actually allows it to be that little bit more glossy compared to the other flat matte products that are out there, which is a great product for bathrooms and kitchens where you've got high humidity and steam, etc. Obviously for outside, it's a walk in the park, it's a great product. It has excess of 30,000 scrubs. It's a waterproof flexible product, and it can obviously, it is adhesion promoted and can be applied to any clean sanded surface. Then we go on to Paintcore's Elegance Silk, which is our sheen, as I've mentioned. Elegance Silk is a product that can actually also be utilized as a waterproofing system. So if at any stage you need to have a special color on a flat deck roof and your person says they want a special color to blend in with the house, elegant silk, no problem whatsoever. You can tint it and you can paint the roof, no problem with that. Then moving down to our Essence. Essence is our mid-sheen. I'm sure you've seen Essence has only been around for I'll say a couple of years. It could have been 5 years already, 6 years already. It's a product that's doing exceptionally well. Obviously, paints are getting very, very expensive. So we understand that there's a need to still try and give a good quality product at a reasonable price, where Essence is a great product. It's a mid-sheen guaranteed for 7 years. Also, it's got great film finish where it's got great stain resistance. So a lot of people are utilizing that at the moment. It's also got a very, very good resistance to water and steam. So to utilize that as an alternative, you guys are more than welcome. It's a great product. Then moving on to our Pristina, the last but not most of least, it's a fully matte finish product. Now, Pristina is a very, very common product which a lot of developers like to utilize. And I think it's a great idea as well, because when you're applying your primer coats onto the surface, and then when you've got a lot of settlement that happens on a new build, Pristina is a great product because a matte product obviously touches up very, very well. And also you're going to get settlement, because a lot of people think when they're building a brand new house that it's going to last for 10 years. That is further from the truth. The house is going to settle down, it's going to settle, and it's going to form some cracks here and there. That's just the way it goes. So we tend to tell people, if it's a new house, rather understand that after between 3, 4, and 5 years, you're going to have to repaint your house. At that stage, you can move on to your Essence or your Elegance. I mean, if they want to go with it, we rather let them be made aware of what the circumstances are. Pristina, as I said, it's a super acrylic. It's a great product. It's a 5-year guarantee. It's a great product for ceilings also. Touches up very well, and it's white, and it's obviously at a reasonable price. Okay, we're going to now move on to slide E. So generally on a new build, on your trim, you got a variance, quite a variety, I should say, of surfaces. You got wood, steel, and composites. Your composites can be your new tech fiber board. Sometimes it's recycled plastic and a couple of other type of things. So we're going to start off with the priming of steel. So obviously, if you painting a house where it's steel work, mild steel, galvanized steel, a lot of the times when you're getting new steel that comes from the factory, it basically comes with a bit of a releasing agent or a layer of grease when the guys are pushing it through their production phase. Obviously, at this stage, you've got to make sure that you degrease the surface. So degreaser, our Grime Reaper, is a thick, pasty type product which has got a particle inside it. And what happens is you would use either a brush or a rag or a cloth, and you'd apply it onto the surface, and then you would rub it vigorously in a circular motion, and you would clean the surface as you're moving along. And that will obviously degrease it. Then you would rinse it off with water prior to receiving the primer coats or top coats on top of that. This is very, very important, because this is what's going to make your adhesion of the product stick to the surface. In some instances, when the rust has maybe been standing in the yard a little bit longer than necessary, then you'll get a slight bit of rust on it. So we've got a product called Rustcon. Rustcon is a water-based rust converter. It's a great product, one being it's water-based, so you're obviously starting to help the environment instead of using those other harsh type of products. You just got to follow the data sheets nice and correctly, just by using a wire brush and cleaning it, taking the sanding dust off, and then you can apply on the Rustcon. Obviously, it's imperative to make sure that the Rustcon is completely converted prior to applying your subsequent primers, because otherwise you're just not doing the job correctly. Once you've now degreased and you've put on the Rustcon in the affected areas, we've got two options out there to prime your steel. Obviously, you guys have always known for a long time our EnviroPrime, which is our anti-corrosive red oxide primer. It is a really, really great product. It's a Green Star rating. It is an environmental friendly water-based product. At this stage, also want to mention that you guys are very aware that when you are priming any surface, be it your plaster or your steel, we spoke about film build a couple of times. Please make sure, especially on your steel surfaces, that you put on 2 coats of primer to make sure that the surface is sealed. Because if you get some problems where the water is going to get in and it's going to rust, it's going to get rust creep, and then you're going to have to end up going back to either trying to sand it back or replacing sheeting. So please make sure you put on the primers to the correct specifications. So that's the EnviroPrime, is our water-based primer, obviously for galvanized and mild steel. Then the other alternative is our Paint Cores All Prime Plus. Now the All Prime Plus is an acid etch primer. It comes in black. We do have it also available in yellow and other colors on request. It is what it is. It is an etch primer. It is a great product that adheres onto your steel surface very, very well. It's very, very popular for the areas down by the coast. You know, when you've got those kind of salt sprays that are happening down there, it's better to use a product like that's going to give you a lot more protection onto the surface. In some instances where you feel like you're going to be a little bit compromised, use All Prime Plus. It's going to be so much better. Okie dokie, now we're going to go on to priming of wood. So on your new build, obviously you've got a couple of areas of wood, hardwood and softwood respectively, whether you paint in certain window frames or eaves or areas like that. A product of ours is Unisub. So Unisub is a universal undercoat. A lot of people ask us, is it a wood primer? It is a wood primer. We make it that it can be done on steel and on wood. It's got good penetrating properties. It's going to bind up and it's going to seal to a very, very good degree. It's also a great product that takes stains out, which I'm not going to talk about because that's what Zach's got to go for. Another product which you can also use on our soft wood, not ideally on hardwood, is Paintcore's new product called Universal Undercoat Trade, sorry. So I'm sure the developers around here would like to have heard about it already. It's a new trade range for our Universal Undercoat that's been launched. And obviously it's ideal for softwood, and it can also be utilized on steel where need be. But it's also got good penetrating properties. Ideally you want to stick with Unisub for the hardwood because it's just a better product from covering, and it is a higher volume on that. Okay, then the last thing for priming of wood, we got a product of ours called Wood First. Wood First is a case where if you've got wooden fencing and a lot of guys don't want to varnish it, you can actually just treat it with our Wood First, which is an oil. The great thing about it is it has a pesticide in it so that you can protect your wood from wood borers and other chochos around there. It can be tinted in a variety of colors. So it's very nice where you can leave it in its raw stage, or you can a little bit of a tan in the color. It'll be very, very good for that. And the nice thing about the Wood First, that at any stage that you feel that you want to give it more protection, you can overcoat it with one of our products, Wood Coat or our Wood Love, which is our varnish, to give it more protection on top of that. Now going on to the priming of the composites. This is a little bit more advanced, where you have got your PVC pipes or your barge boards and the rhino boards, barge boards and fascia boards. That's your NewTek fiber cement board. So the three products that we have for those kind of surfaces, for the barge boards and fascia boards, are our Rhino Seal, Plaster Primer Trade and Premium. So Plaster Primer Trade and Premium, we've discussed already. Plaster Primer Trade is a solvent-based plaster primer, fine for that. Plaster Primer Premium is the waterborne, the low odor product that can be utilized on it. In certain instances, the guys tend to go with the Rhino Seal because it has actually got a fine particle size in it, so it tends to penetrate and bind up much, much better. It's obviously a little bit milky, it dries clear, so you can imagine the clearer the product, the more it's going to penetrate into the substrate and bind it up. So to utilize that for those type of instances, you'll have no problems whatsoever before applying your subsequent top coats thereon. Now also you're going to be painting PVC. So if you've got PVC pipes coming out of the walls, or in some instances the guys have got recycled plastic that they want to paint, we've got a primer called GTP. It's Paintcore's Glazed Tile Primer. It's a water-based product. It has got great adhesion. It's a very, very adhesion promoted type of product that can go on these kind of surfaces. Sometimes we just recommend that the guys give it a light sanding, remove the sanding dust, and then you can go and put this primer on, Glazed Tile Primer, as a primer coat before receiving your elegance. Although elegance is adhesion promoted, and we know that 9 times out of 10 you could give that a slight sanding and wipe off the sanding dust and stick it on and paint elegance, it'll work. We just want to make sure that you have no problems on the site whatsoever. The other alternative also on the PVC pipes is our Unisub, once again our universal undercoat, the top of the range one. Also just cleaning the surface, making sure that it's clean. Also remember that when the guys are manufacturing the PVC pipes, it works on the same principle as an off-shutter concrete or something, where there's a releasing agent. So in some instances the pipe might feel a little bit oily. So in some instances you might have to degrease it if necessary and give it a light sanding, clean it off and then paint it. So just be aware of that, please. Has anybody got any questions that you'd like at this stage to ask? Thanks. So the gentleman is asking that on fiber cement boards or those fascia boards he's been putting on Acryseal. The question is, have you been diluting the Acryseal? Okay, so I asked him if he's been diluting the Acryseal. He said yes. In some instances you can get away with it. We've just found that the Rhino Seal gives you more penetration. I mean, like I said to you previously, put in Acryseal on your bucket that's diluted, you can most probably say that you're going to get away with it. But obviously, it's when we are busy drawing up a specification, we want to give you the best product that we believe. There's guys out there that say they'll only use Rhino Seal and nothing else, or they'll only use Acry Seal and nothing else, and they've been successful with it. So we just got to go with what we've seen and proven to be the best. So obviously we can know, but you'll most probably find you'll get away with it. No problem at all. Okie dokes. Now we're moving on to slide F, which is the new build roof and ceilings. So in this instance, we're going to talk about it where you've basically put in an extension onto your house, a cottage. So now you've got new tiles that you've now got to paint to match your existing house with the other tiles. So in the instance where you've got a steel roof that you're going to be putting up, either corrugated roof or your RBR sheeting, whatever the case may be. In some instances also the chroma deck. So if you're wanting to go ahead with using, for argument's sake, new RBR steel, you're going to be doing the same practices, making sure that the sheeting is degreased. Always making sure. And there's obviously a very simple test method with it. You can see when you pour water on it, when it makes bubbles on the surface, it means that it's actually degreased. If it's running off, you can see that it needs to be done. Okie dokie. So when you're busy, you've degreased your new steel, then obviously you're going to prime it with Paintcore's Enviro Prime, the water-based primer, or the All Prime Plus. Remember, it's always a good idea to utilize the product of the All Prime Plus in the areas where you've got high humidity and those kind of factors where you need more protection. A lot of guys tend to use it on I-beams and their slabs because they know they're going to get a whole lot more protection out of it. It just gets a lot tougher. Okie dokie. Then you're going to be putting on that one, or the other option is the Enviro Prime. If you want to do, for argument's sake, paint your chroma deck sheeting to go and match, if it comes out of the factory, you want to do it exactly the same practice. You can definitely paint it, not a problem at all. You just got to make sure you inspect the coating. And I'm going to say at this stage that if you're wanting to do something like that, call us, let us come out and inspect it, and we can drop a correct specification after inspecting it and advising you accordingly. The other option is, now you're not going to put steel, you're going to put up a tiled roof. So you've got a nice tiled roof now that you want to blend in. So you're going to be painting it. You obviously got to first make sure that your tile is very, very clean. There's no chalking or no underbound particles on the surface. So it's going to be thoroughly cleaned and it's going to be dry and it's not chalk. The two products you can utilize is Paintcore's Acry Seal. As the gentleman was saying earlier on, the Acry Seal is what you would put onto the new tile. Diluted 1-to-1 with water. Or the alternative is, if you found that your surface is a little bit more powdery than normal and you need to use something that's going to penetrate and bind better, it is Paintcore's Rhino Seal. At this stage, I'd like to let you guys know that Rhino Seal must never ever be diluted whatsoever, please. Sometimes guys get a little bit confused. They see it's maybe a water-based product, which it's not. It's a waterborne technology. It cannot be diluted at all. It comes out ready for spray or roller application, no problem whatsoever. Once that's bound up, then you can put your subsequent top coats onto the roof. Okie dokes, then we are going to be priming wood. So in some instances, you've got your exposed trusses or eaves or other wood that surround your surface there for the roof. As we've mentioned there, either pergolas or so. You can use Paintcore's Universal Undercoats. It's our Unisub, as we mentioned before, that one, or the Universal Undercoat Trade. Just remember, the product, the Unisub, is going to give you a lot more obliteration quicker, where the Universal Undercoat Trade will not. You're still going to get good adhesion on both of the products, but your coverage is going to be put out there. You'll be able to see that. Now you're going to be painting the surface. And as you can see there on that little picture there by the primers, that little sign there is basically microns. Once again, as I mentioned prior before, microns is all about film thickness. Not 2 coats, 2 coats, ladies and gents. That's not 2 coats, that's 2 coats. So make sure you put it on the correct film thickness, and then you're going to get your protection on the surface. You paint in your roof, you can use Paintcore's Ruvacryl. It's obviously available in a variety of colors. It's a great product. It's also adhesion promoted, so it can go over any surface whatsoever, not a problem at all. If you're in the case where you're wanting to paint your roof for like a corporate color, some people have got reds or blues or other types of bright greens. We can tint the color. You can tint it from Elegance, or you can tint it from Envirocoat. Ideally, you want to stick to the light colors with Elegance because it's also nice. It'll keep the temperature down on your roof. If you wanted to go for a darker, more vibrant type color, you've got to use Envirocoat. You just got to use the right product in the right area again, because of the elements getting so much harsher out there, and the sun, it is attacking the paint films a lot quicker. So just be cognizant of that, please. Okay, lastly, we're going to be painting ceilings, cornices, and internal trusses. So the internal trusses, it's quite easy. You got your Unisub and you can paint with your white product on top of it. They're using your ceilings and cornices. Please make sure if you're using a low-grade polystyrene cornice, don't ever put a heavy plaster primer over it. We all know it's going to melt it and run down the wall. So if you're using a decent cornice or decent cornice in your ceilings, you're going to be utilizing our Paintcore's Pristina or Econacryl or our Acrylanda. So painting your ceilings, it's going to be easy to fill. Have I spoken about Rhinolite, gents? I've missed out Rhinolite. Sorry, I do apologize. I've got to go back to the gypsum plaster. I do apologize. I thought I was missing something. Okay, going back to the gypsum plaster and the board. So gypsum plaster is Rhinolite. It's as simple as that. So obviously gypsum plaster, a lot of the times, you get guys that know the Rhinolite and you get guys that think they know the Rhinolite. It's imperative that if you Rhinolite, that it's done correctly. If you've got a Rhinolited surface that is not bound and strong enough, you must never use a plaster primer. You should rather use our Rhino-Seal because that's going to give you the penetrating properties into the Rhinolite. So that's very, very important, guys. I'm not trying to say you guys don't, but you know what I'm talking about. You don't want it to end up delaminating from the surface eventually. So if you've got poor Rhinolite on your surface, rather stick to the Rhino-Seal to seal and penetrate well enough to receive your top coats. So in the instance now, you've also got your gypsum board. Now it's your normal board and you've got your bishop strips and you're going to be painting it. It's also important that you make sure that those strips are also clean and grease free, because sometimes it's also got a bit of a releasing agent on the surface. You've got to make sure that's all cleaned up. Then you would obviously paint it with universal undercoat, our Unisub. That goes on your nail heads. That will also go onto your bishop strips before you apply your final coats. To go and paint your boards, you can use any one of the products there, Plaster Primer Trade, Plaster Primer Premium, and as it says there, the Unisub on the bishop strips. That's why these books, I think, will also be a great thing going forward if you guys can keep it on your person, that whenever you need to refer to something, it just gives you a bit of a quick reference of what to utilize and the surface it is. Remember, if you guys are better, we don't have to come out and look at technical complaints. Makes us look better. Okie dokie. So that was the gypsum boards, and now we'll move over to the top coat. Sorry about that. So your tiled roofs are going to be painted with the Roof-Acryl. Obviously steel roof and tiled roof, no problem. Roof-Acryl is adhesion promoted, so it can also go onto your steel roof, which has been prepped prior to, making sure you got your two coats on, and also your tiled roof after it's got a sealer on it. Then you can also apply your top coats of that. Just to reaffirm there on the ceilings and cornices again. So the ceilings, obviously the nice product is to use, the matter the product on the ceiling, the better. You know, it becomes a little bit difficult when you're painting ceiling boards or Rhino-lighted boards. Please make sure, guys, that you follow the correct painting practice and also use the correct roller. You know, our products have got some high viscosity and it's got good coverage and it's nice and thick, if I can explain it that way. So sometimes when you're rolling it, you tend to roll too much texture onto the surface. So make sure you can actually roll it, keep a wet edge, working that product out, because more often than not, we hear about the lines. Look at the tent, for argument's sake. You get those lines, which guys are always moaning about. It's imperative to follow the right painting practice, keeping a wet edge, and also use the right roller. You know, the long pile roller in this case, on a ceiling, it's definitely not suggested. You want to go the short pile, and it's going to give you a better finish there on. Okay, guys. Pristina, Econacryl, and Acrylanda, they cover all very, very well. It's a flat matte product, and its obliteration is great, and it's also touch up very easily, so that's going to give you a better result at the end of the day. The Subtex, that is our textured undercoat. In some instances, when the guys seem to have a little bit more of a problem on the ceiling, we say if you just paint it with a slight texture on it, just so that it gives you a uniform finish, that's going to give you the desired finish that the client's going to be happy. And at the end of the day, you just want to get the client to be as happy as possible with the result that they're going to get. Lastly, the Elegance Matte, obviously for wet rooms, we spoke about it, that's your bathrooms, it's in showers, it's in areas where there's lots of humidity and steam. We do have a product that we put into the paint called MX Plus, which is an on-surface preservative to prevent mold and algae from growing onto the surface, which is added to something like Elegance. Please make sure if you've got areas which are really, really bad, we can always increase the level in it. We can talk about that on special requests. But furthermore, that is basically a new build. And if there are any questions that anybody would like to ask at this stage. So the gentleman was asking that on a bathroom ceiling, what is the additive that they put into the paint to prevent the algae from growing on the surface? That is a product called MX Plus. So MX Plus is what you add to any acrylic paint, but it is ideal to do it with a paint like Elegance because it's got the waterproofing properties in it. We do have a level of MX Plus in the product already. We've actually gone, or should I say not we, the bosses have already gone before us and said, listen, we can see that we're having a lot more humidity around than usual. So they've already increased the levels of the MX Plus in the product to do it before you guys. But if you get an area which you really believe is going to be a big concern, let us know. We might have to just increase that. Okay. Anybody else got a question out there? Okay. Thanks very much, guys.